Welcome into the CBS Sports Network, where we are going to spend the next hour talking about college basketball recruiting, and also a little NBA draft talk. And obviously, the big news or the upcoming event in college basketball this weekend is the matchup between Darryn Peterson and Dybantsa. BYU versus Kansas. Everybody's talking about it. And fellas, for us, it is a good opportunity to revisit the debate that we've been having for well over a year now in terms of who the number one prospect should have been in last year's 2025 class. You always also have to add Cameron Boozer into that equation. So we are here today to reassess what we did about 8 months ago now. Remember, we finished with Darryn Peterson as the number one ranked prospect in the national class. Dybantsa finished at 2. Cameron Boozer finished at 3. So now that we're more than midway through the college basketball season, my question to each of you, and Trav, I will begin with you. Which of those 3 players do you think has been most impressive solely in college basketball this season?
Well, to me, that's Cameron Boozer. The dominance that he's having this season. I mean, it's hard to top what Cooper Flagg did just a year ago. But Cameron Boozer is arguably having a better freshman season than Flagg did last year. And what he's showing with his inside-out game, just how physically strong he is. This dude is strong as an ox. He moves everybody on the block. He owns his area, rebounding the ball, and he's also continued his ascension as a shooter. To me, he is the best player in college basketball. However, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, I don't know if he's the best prospect.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think, Bossi, that's a terrific point Trav made about the progression of his shooting. I think that's the most notable development we've seen in the college season. I mean, he's as physical and as smart as expected, but the shooting is beyond what I was anticipating this year. So I'll ask you the same question. Who do you think has been the best college player to date?
Yeah, ever since we pitched this show and what we were going to talk about, I've been wrestling with this one. I think you have to throw Peterson out because your best ability is availability. He's been out. But I'll tell you what tipped it in slightly in the favor of Cameron Boozer for me was last night seeing Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple combined for 83 points, seeing just how much help Cooper had compared to the help that Cameron Boozer has this year. And if you look at Dybantsa, he's been phenomenal. I wouldn't argue with the choice of him. Like I said, I was leaning towards him until today. But on a night where maybe he doesn't have it going, he's got Rob Wright and Richie Saunders that he can lean on to kind of take a little bit of pressure off him. I don't think Cameron Boozer just has that level of supporting cast around him. Don't get me wrong. He's got plenty of other good players. And, you know, Caleb Foster's in hit and miss, and they're going to get things. But if Cam Boozer doesn't have an A-plus game, it's really going to be difficult for Duke to win, and everyone that knows that playing against them. So that's why I'm going to lean ever so slightly to Boozer, just because I think it's so much more important to be great, that he be great night in and night out, and he's lived up to it so far this year.
So I'm going to echo the sentiments that you both said, and I thought you both made really terrific points there. I, too, think Cameron Boozer has been the best player in college basketball this season. Bossi, I couldn't agree more with the fact that I think his supporting cast this year is less than what Cooper Flagg had last year. The other thing that I think goes unnoticed, and Trotter and I are going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, is just how dominant Duke has been as of late. I mean, they have a very legitimate chance to call themselves the best team in the country, at least if you're talking about the last 3 weeks of college basketball. And Boozer has had his fingerprints all over that. More than that, even when they weren't playing quite as well in the beginning of the season, certainly in the beginning of conference play, he was the one who was really winning them games. I think the other thing, you know, people are going to cite the counting stats and AJ's scoring numbers. BYU has really, I think, constructed their system around AJ. And AJ's playing great. Let's not take anything away from him. But I think it's just a little bit of a different calculus when, you know, you're the primary domino in the offense and you have the freedom to take 4, 5, 6, 7 dribbles every time with A-level shooters spacing the floor. So I too think Cameron Boozer is the guy who has impacted winning more than anyone else. But there's another side to this coin. When we do high school rankings, we're trying to synthesize multiple variables, not just who's going to be the best college player, but who is going to be the best NBA prospect. In fact, that is that is the most important criteria at the top of the class. So, fellas, knowing what we know now, who would you take with the number one pick in next year's draft? Trav, I will start with you.
Yeah, I still lean with Darryn Peterson here. I think what he's shown this year, despite the injury concerns now, those injuries and his lack of availability throughout the season is leaving the door open for AJ Dybantsa to make the move. However, every time that Darryn is on the court, the game just comes so freakishly easy to him. And I think that comes at a detriment. I was telling Bossi this the other day. When you watch Darryn Peterson and you watch AJ Dybantsa separately, AJ's explosive. He's exciting. He makes a lot of highly difficult plays. But Darryn Peterson just makes everything look easy. And what tips the cap for me for Darryn Peterson is just how dynamic and impactful he is, not only with the ball in his hands as a playmaker and a scorer, but also off the ball. What he has shown in his ability to fly off screens, make shots off the catch, off the fly, in a bunch of highly difficult scenarios. I give it all to Darryn Peterson. I think he is a guy that can really help you win and go deep in the playoffs for an NBA franchise.
Bossi, same question. Who is your pick with the number one overall selection at this point in time in the 2026 NBA draft?
Yeah, I really wish I could give you this answer at about 6 o'clock tomorrow night after I make my way over to Lawrence to watch AJ and Darryn play head-to-head, which, by the way, is only the fourth time in the history of the 24/7 Sports rankings that the number one and number two player will face each other in a regular season college game. So it's going to be pretty special. But Travis stole a little bit of my thunder here, but I lean to Peterson too. I love AJ Dybantsa. I think that guy's got a multiple all-star career ahead of him. But when I watch all these guys, the difference is to me that offense and the game on both ends of the floor just seem to come so easy to Peterson. He never looks forced. He never looks rushed. You watch him and it almost looks like he's playing in slow motion out there, even though he's actually going faster than everyone else. And I had a chance to get over and see him play earlier this year live in the game against TCU. And the guy's just moving at a different speed, even when he's not 100%. So I still lean to him. But if these injury concerns continue to persist, I could easily see myself switching over to AJ. And also, when we look at this, guys, we also have to factor in eventually who gets the number one pick and which player makes most sense for that team that gets it. But all things being equal, I'm still leaning towards Peterson right now.
I think, as you said, Bossi, the injuries are becoming an increasing variable as time goes on because availability is the most important thing in the NBA. If you're talking about somebody who's got star potential, who a franchise is going to build around, when it comes to winning in the playoffs, it means you have to be reliably healthy for 2 straight months. And so I think DP, who we made the number one player or prospect in the country last year, has been, when he's been healthy, even better than expected this year. The shot making has exceeded my expectations. He's more dynamic than I expected him to be. All of that while I'm not sure we've seen him at completely 100%. Even some of the best games he's had, I've watched him and I've said, he still doesn't look like he's moving with the full level of force and explosiveness that we saw him with in high school. But the injuries and the durability are becoming a concern. Now, hopefully these are, just 2 isolated incidents. He said, hey, the hip or whatever stems from that, that's one thing. And then it was just a rolled ankle and it's nothing long-term to worry about. But if it turns out that this is indicative of a pattern or some type of medical red flag, which you can bet everybody with that top pick is going to dig into, that is going to be a concern. And simultaneously, I think AJ deserves a boatload of credit. As I said, he's got the benefit of almost unlimited freedom, unlimited volume in a BYU supporting cast and system that has been built to fit around him in the best way possible. But this guy has raised the level of his game. I was very publicly critical of it to him last year. Bossi, you were there when I said it to him at McDonald's. I said, I feel like this is for you than a competition at this point. Like, you're always playing to the camera. And he admitted, he's like, yeah, I've had cameras on me forever and I always know where they are. But this year it's like he's gotten back to just trying to win games. And he's shown an ability to take games over. Second half, I think more so than anybody else as a scorer in college basketball. Listen, What I'm trying to say is that I think this is an open-ended discussion that is going to continue on. Tomorrow is going to be an important next chapter in this. And Bossi, to your point about wishing you could wait to see what happens till tomorrow. Well, after tomorrow, next week, we're going to have updates to the CBS Sports Big Board. And then after the NBA trade deadline passes, we're going to have an updated mock draft where we can see exactly who's joining that tank club and who's playing for AJ or Darryn Peterson. Guys, I would also say I think Cam Boozer is firmly in that conversation. I know there's some people who like him, believe it or not, best of all. He may not have the upside of those two guys, but his reliability, his durability, physicality, the overlap of physicality and basketball intelligence with the ascending skill set and the unmatched winning pedigree is really something special. The bottom line is the big three are still the big three. This is an awesome freshman class. There's a bunch of guys who are way better than we thought, but these three guys are still setting the bar. And tomorrow is going to be a really exciting chapter. Don't go anywhere. We've got much more coming up right here on the CBS Sports Network. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Network, where we still believe in mid-major Cinderellas. If you've been watching the show in the last couple of weeks, you've already heard all about programs like St. Louis and Miami of Ohio, who have two of the best offenses in college basketball. And I would say those are probably the two most well-known mid-major programs in the country. But with the NCAA tournament now just about a month and a half away, it is time to start looking at who could be putting on Cinderella's slipper. So we're going to break down some of the best mid-major programs and players in the country in this next segment. Of course, I'm joined as always by Issac Trotter and Travis Branaham. And fellas, the way we're going to organize this is, Trotter, I'm going to go to you to tell me about the program. And then we'll go to Trav to tell me about the player to watch, because let's face it, every good Cinderella, they need that player who's capable of stealing the show when we all call out sick to work on Thursday for the NCAA tournament. So we will begin with Belmont, a program that has a very proud history. It's always a fun program to watch offensively. They play an aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. But Trotter, what do fans need to know about the Belmont program this year?
Yeah, it's beautiful because they've kind of blended the things that made them great and kind of fixed some of the holes that they had in their roster. This is the number one offense and effective field goal percentage so far this year. So they're running beautiful sets like you'd expect from a Casey Alexander coach club. They have great shooting. Tyler Lundblade's like just a knockdown sniper. I call him a net shredder. He has 73s this year at a really high volume. But on the other end, they've become an elite shot blocking team. They have way more interior depth and fortitude inside. This is the best shot blocking team in Belmont history in the modern era. So they have that beautiful offense, and now they have that interior firepower. Sam Orm, Brigham Rogers, Owen Dillon is a stretch four that can really shoot it at 6'9", and Drew Charnowski has been one of the breakout players in the league. So marrying that beautiful offense with a much improved interior defense is super key, because if we're going to have a team put on that Cinderella slipper, if you can't guard in the paint and you can't rebound and you can't protect the rim, you're almost dead on arrival against some of these super physical teams at the top of the sport.
All right, Trav, Trotter just said a name there that I want to ask you about. Drew Charnowski is someone that maybe the common college basketball fan doesn't know just yet, but there's a better than average chance they might know him in a couple of months. What do people need to know?
Yeah, he is the guy that greases this team's wheels. He is involved on both ends of the floor, especially on offense. He's the guy that they use to connect out on top of the perimeter as the big man, getting into dribble handoffs, ball screens where he's the rim roller and play finisher. This guy is big, he's strong, he's physical, he's smart, he has good feet, hands, and touch. He can face up and drive you and get you to the rim, draw fouls and contact. He's a really smart, good passer. He's averaging nearly 2 blocks a game for this Belmont team. This guy is just invaluable to what the future success for this team is.
All right. Another mid-major program to know is Tulsa. They are currently 57 overall in KenPom. They've got an 18-3 record. This is another club, though, that I just love watching offensively. One of the common denominators as we start talking about Cinderellas or these giant killers is three-point shooting. And there is almost no one better in the country than Tulsa. In fact, there's only one better because they're second best in the country at three-point shooting. 41% as a team from behind the three-point line. Are you kidding me, Trotter? Tell me about these guys.
Yeah, the guard play is just terrific. Tylan Riley is probably the straw that stirs the drink. He gets in the paint at will, super fast. He got a great hesitation move. He can slow down, decelerate, and then they just spread the floor at a very high level. Miles Barnstable, he needs a quarter inch of space to shoot threes. Got a quick trigger, and David Green is that versatile mismatch four. He's played in the league a long time. I think he was a class of 2019 guy, and he's somehow been able to stick around after some injuries. So he's a really veteran player. And he's playing the best basketball of his career. So, the American Conference is a kind of a weird league this year. South Florida is really talented, but haven't really put it together at certain spots. FAU is a really talented roster as well. They've done a good job down there, but Tulsa could very easily be the team that comes out of this league. They're really scary 12 seed potentially. And I think there'd be a lot more buzz about them if they had held on against Kansas State. They were up by 5 with 48 seconds to go and somehow magically lost that game. So they're 18-3 and 100% legit because the talent, the shooting, the size, the guard play, they have a lot of those key recipes to be a March Madness, kind of bracket buster.
Yeah, one of those names that Trotter just mentioned is Tylan Riley. As he said, he is the guy that is extremely quick with the ball in his hands. He gets into the paint, he makes those around him better. And he's a very intriguing story. He played at Cal Baptist for his first 2 years of college basketball, where he averaged just 7.5 points and about 2.5 assists a game. So doesn't really pop off when it comes to a player that hit the transfer portal, but credit to this Tulsa staff and not only just finding him, but also developing him and turning him into a serious weapon, because this guy it can really wreak havoc with the ball in his hands with that quickness, that burst, his ability to get down to the paint and then create for other people and finish at the rim. And not only, can't forget to mention what he can do on the defensive end of the floor.
All right, guys, I want to ask you about Santa Clara because they have been a model of consistency over the years. I think it's 4 straight 20-win seasons. John Rothstein just said earlier today they are among his last 4 out, which means they are within striking distance. Obviously, try and get multiple bids out of that West Coast Conference. Trotter, as we look at Herb Sendek's squad, always so good, but what do they need to do to get over the hump, and what could be different about that quest this season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one thing that's helped them with the bubble is that a lot of those teams on the bubble haven't won games against elite competition. So the bubble is a little bit thinner this year. The top teams have kind of held on for dear life. And so that's opened the door for a team like Santa Clara, who's kind of taking care of their business for long stretches. They're 9-1 in West Coast Conference play. And how I describe their team is they just got a lot of good players. They have 9 guys that can come into the game and be impactful. Elijah Mahi is a senior forward wing, can handle it, play on the ball, play off the ball, can make shots, can drive it. He's tough, he's big, he's physical, and they have great size. They have 4 guys. They have a lineup with 4 guys that are 6'7" or taller that they can kind of mix in there. So I think if they play a high major team in March, they're not going to be overwhelmed from a size perspective. And the front court is deep. And Alan Graves, we're going to talk about him in here in just a second. He is like Anton Watson 2.0. He's right, in that exact type of mold, the long, big Gonzaga forward that really impacts winning at a really high level. And I think Santa Clara, this may end up being Herb Sendek's best team because he's just accumulated 9 guys that can really play, and they all play together at a really high level, and they're good on defense and they're good on offense. And if they make the tournament, they're going to be scary.
Yeah, the Santa Clara team is rock solid, and Alan Graves has been a breakout player for them. He was a redshirt freshman last year, and he's really blossomed in his first season wearing the jersey and out on the court. He's big, he's strong, and he's really skilled. He is what I would call an analytical darling. What he does with his efficiency inside and out, with the passing, the rebounding in just 22 minutes a game, he's averaging roughly 11 points, 8 rebounds a game. So this guy is really popping off. He can stretch the floor and make shots from 3. And as he said, this kid impacts winning and will be a big piece as to what Santa Clara can get done this season.
All right, guys, the next team we're going to talk about probably needs to win their conference tournament to get into the big dance. And I'm talking about Furman from the Southern Conference. They're 15-7 right now, just 168 overall in KenPom. But they've got some dynamic talent, including, and we'll get into this, one of the best mid-major freshmen in the country, if not the best mid-major freshman in the country. So, Trotter, assuming these guys do get through their conference tournament, because it's worth noting, of their 7 losses, 4 of them came in the month of November. If they were to make it to the big dance, what makes this club dangerous?
You know, they're really young. And so like that's the one aspect of them. They've gotten a lot better from November to now. And I think this might be Bob Ritchie's like highest upside team. He's had some teams that make the tournament. You know, remember they beat Virginia a few years ago, but they were old and a veteran group. This one's young, and you kind of see the good from them and you also see the bad from them in a 2-week span. Like that's just kind of their MO, but they're really big. They're really tall. They're one of the tallest teams in college basketball. They have terrific positional size, and they're just injured right now. Cooper Bowser is one of their best bigs. If he can get back healthy and kind of get rolling here down the stretch, Asa Thomas, a transfer out of Clemson, if he can get healthy and impact this team down the stretch, I think the version of Furman that we see in March is a whole lot different than the version of Furman that we've seen in December and January. So really, really dangerous. And I'm going to set Trav up here. There is not enough words that I have for Alex Wilkins. He's one of my favorite young guards in college basketball this year, and he is an absolute delight. One of the best pull-up shooters in the sport. And we know, I mean, pull-up shooting feels like such a valuable trait for so many teams at the highest level. And Alex Wilkins certainly has it.
All right, go ahead, Trav. I'll answer for myself when you're done.
Yeah, this kid is awesome. 6'5", long, athletic point guard, averaging over 18 points and 5 assists a game. And when I saw him and what he's doing at Furman this year, I had to go back into my own records and pull up my old notes of him. I saw him one time, and I immediately texted Fink. I'm like, yo, dude, what the heck were we doing? I mean, I read through the notes, and this guy just popped off on so many things that you look for in a prospect, with the positional size, the length, the athleticism, the burst, the ability to get downhill, make plays for himself and others. And I'm just sitting there, how did we miss such a blatant, obvious, just promising prospect? Not to say he is a surefire high major guy coming out of high school, because he was thin, he was physically immature. But man, has he blossomed. And I think that his best basketball is still ahead of him, because he's still physically immature as a freshman. I think he's going to continue filling out and continuing to get better. So Furman, they have a freshman star on their hands.
In my defense, because Alex Wilkins is from my backyard, he's a New England kid. Played for the Middlesex Magic. Mike Crotty was a friend of mine. I remember saying to Mike after watching them at the Under Armour Association, I think it was in Rock Hill. It was like the early session before the live period. And I told Mike, I was like, that's your best guy. But at the time, he was like 150 pounds. And I know the three of us have had this conversation over text. Like, he wasn't a high major guy at this point. If anything, I think the path that Alex Wilkins chose is now going to be a model for other high school players, because he went somewhere where he was wanted. He went somewhere where he had an immediate opportunity, and he's proving it. And his future market, regardless of what he decides to do, when he decides to do it, is going to be dictated not by what he did in high school, but what he's doing in college. And so I think it's a really important example for high school kids to follow, to say, hey, you know what? That kid went to somewhere where he was good enough to play right away, where he was a priority, where he had the opportunity to play through his mistakes. And given that opportunity, he's gotten to perform in a way that turns out to be much more meaningful than anything he showed in high school. So tip of the cap to Alex Wilkins. He's been really good. Trav, I know you wanted to touch on Utah State. So real quick, Trotter, do you have anything on that club? And then Trav, immediately follow on the player to watch there.
Yeah, I'll keep it snappy. They're old. They play like a funky zone, a matchup zone that really forces a ton of tough shots. And the backcourt can go. They're really, really deep. But MJ Collins and Mason Falslev are two guys that, honestly, I feel like they could play anywhere in America right now. Jared Calhoun is going to be a rising name in the coaching carousel, I assume, like every Utah State coach is for the last few years. But really good team, really old team. I think they're the best team in the Mountain West. Mountain West a little bit down this year, but I think Utah State will end up outlasting San Diego State.
First off, I'm glad you mentioned MJ Collins. This is a kid, if I remember correctly, we had him in the top 150 at one point. He started at Virginia Tech, transferred to Vanderbilt. He never really found his footing, but now he has blossomed into a tremendous scorer for this Utah State team. But the guy I really want to headline is Mason Falslev. This guy does so much to impact the game for this Utah State team. He's really skilled. He's really smart. He's got size. He's strong. He's tough. He can score it from inside and out with his ability to get downhill and get to the rim and then make shots from off the catch in the pool, but also can really see the floor and make plays for other people. This kid is a through and through winner for this Utah State team. And I think that duo right there can cause some serious problems come March.
All right, there you have it. Everything you need to know about the potential Cinderellas as January gets ready to turn to February. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Trotter and I are going to talk about some of the most notable trends in college basketball over the last week or two. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network. Now, on this next segment, Trotter and I are going to get a little informal. We're just going to talk about some of the trends that we have seen in the game that may be a little bit below the radar of the casual fan. So, Trotter, I will first turn it over to you. What are some of the things that we need to watch carefully that you've noticed as of late?
Are we sure that Alabama's not the scariest SEC team? That's when I'm watching them right now and Charles Bediako gets on the floor and, they lose and they just get flamed everywhere on Twitter. And it's really funny. But I'm just thinking about how this roster is going to look in the next couple weeks if Bediako can continue to play for the rest of the season. And Alabama has a pro guard in LeBaron Philon. And Alabama has a pro wing and Amari Allen and a pro big man in Charles Bediako, and their rotations start to really tie together. They can play big, they can play small, they have better rim protection, they have more bigs that they can trust. I think if they can get healthy here, we could be talking about Alabama as a legit national championship contender. And I kind of didn't think they were capable of this because they've gotten crushed on the glass 3 times this year. They really haven't been able to play well for long periods of stretches. But the rotation here that is developing for Nate Oates is something really, really special. And here's one other point. I think Aiden Holloway has been better than Mark Sears. And so, you have LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, Amari Allen, Charles Bediako, Aiden Sherrill on the floor together. That's a really fun 5-man lineup with a ton of depth. I think Alabama's kind of a sleeping giant if they get some good news in the courtroom on February 6th.
Here's the thing about Alabama, and we don't need to litigate, no pun intended, the ethics of this or whatever. You can find that plenty of places. I did a Ion College Basketball podcast with Matt Norlander where we dug into that. But 2 additional points I want to make. Number 1, the timing of this has made it so that Bediako is on the floor. And yet, because it's so late, it's really difficult for anyone else to follow suit. So one of the things that you and I and Travis have been talking about offline is who's next. What other team is going to add somebody from the G League? But at this point, because most schools are already into second semester, it's going to get really, really hard. So Nate Oates not only played this hand, but he played it late enough in the shot clock, so to speak, that it's really difficult for anyone else to follow suit. So I think that's another interesting component of this that adds to some of the animosity. Obviously, programs like Florida, Todd Golden has had a lot to say. And my contention before this is that Florida was the favorite in the SEC. So I think that's going to be a heck of a matchup. The other thing is that Bediako is exactly what Alabama needed. It's one thing to go add a big time talent or an immediate impact player when no one thought you could at the 11th hour. But when it is exactly what your team was missing and exactly what it takes to get you over the hump, it is beyond a game changer in between the lines. I mean, we were talking about Alabama as this perimeter oriented team that when they were making shots could shoot anybody out of the gym, but didn't have the strength and physicality in the front court to potentially win 6 in a row. Now, if he's there, that's a game changer. So again, without getting into all the other stuff, I just think the timing of this and the fit of what Charles Bediako brings to this Alabama team are huge. Trotter, my take here is that Duke, a program that is probably the most recognizable college basketball program in the country, isn't getting enough attention. And more specifically, I'm not sure there is a program that has shown more improvement over the course of the month of January than the Blue Devils. If you go back and look at some of their results right when ACC play was beginning, on New Year's Eve, they beat Georgia Tech by 6 points. 4 days later, they went on the road at Florida State. They won by 4 points. Then they went on the road at Louisville, and they won by 11. Now, more recently, and I think the turning point was that West Coast trip when you have to go play Stanford and Cal back to back. We saw North Carolina struggle. Duke didn't struggle. They hammered both of them, including Stanford by 30. Then they come back and they blow out Wake Forest 21. And then they dismantle Louisville with Michael Brown back in the lineup by 31. So this team is now really, really clicking and looks like one of, I think, the national championship favorites. And I know there's some nuances that you think they've really cleaned up in the last few weeks. Tell me about some of those.
Yeah, they're problem solving. Their transition defense was a sieve, kindly, and that stuff has started to get cleaned up. They're matching up in transition better. They're making fewer scouting report mistakes defensively. They're guarding the ball better. Their defense has definitely ticked up lately back to a top 5 levels because they've inserted Dame Sarr into the mix, and he just turns the top guys' water off every night or just makes their life tougher. So that defense has started to come around a little bit. And then Isaiah Evans has turned into a dude at number 2. Like, he's the number 2 scorer for this team, and he's a scorer, not a shooter. I think that's a really important component with Isaiah Evans. And I think this is Jon Scheyer's best coaching job. This roster doesn't scream overly talented to me, like compared to other Duke teams. This roster has some issues on it comparatively to other Duke teams, and they've just found a way to problem solve and get better and better and better. And what they look like now in January and what they'll look like in 4 or 5 weeks in March, I'm excited because I feel like Jon Scheyer's pressing the right buttons with this group.
To your point about the progression of their defense, they are now rated 4th overall in the country in adjusted efficiency on the defensive end of the floor. That makes them top 5 in both. They've got a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. Trotter, go back to you. Give me one more thing you have noticed in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of frustration about UConn offensively right now. And I predicted this group to be the number 1 offense in America. They aren't. And so there's some concerns that are legit, like they turn it over a lot, but I just I'm not worried about this group. I think they're going to find a way to be a really, really dynamic offense as soon as they can get healthy, get up to speed, and actually just start kind of coalescing a little bit. Because it felt like Braylon Mullins was in and out of the lineup. Terrace Reed was in and out of the lineup. Malachi Smith was slumping. They weren't really sure what his minutes were supposed to be. It's just a lot kind of going on. And so if they can get healthy and just get into a groove a bit, I do expect this offense to start ticking back up to being, a top 5 to 6 unit nationally. It won't look like that in the metrics, but I think it's going to come on the floor. I think they're 1.2 points per possession against Providence. And here's my other thing. I just have an utter refusal to believe that Solo Ball is a 28% 3-point shooter. I do not buy that. I think he's going to get back to shooting back up to, that 40% type of range. So if they can get his shot going, they can kind of figure out their rotation. I think finding more answers when Terrace Reed is off the floor, their offense has been remarkably less efficient when Eric Riba is at the 5. Those are different problems to have, but I just still look at the roster. I love the talent, and I look at all the great shots that they create on a night-to-night basis, and I'm just bullish that this is a buy low spot for this UConn offense moving forward.
So a couple things on UConn. They are 39th overall in the country right now. But to your point, there have been concerns specifically with the turnovers. They're taking more tough twos than they have in years past. And I think a big part of that is because opposing teams are not guarding their 5 men out there. So they're able to curl, whether it's off a pin down or even off a ball screen, and get to those mid-range jumpers. And that's a really good shot for guys like Solo Ball and Silas Demery. Silas Demery has been great, particularly on the defensive end of the floor, but there are still times where he's a half second late with the read in what is a very intricate offensive system. I think Caravan's their best passer, and a lot of the ways in which they get Terrace Reed open is by playing through Caravan and letting him feed him. He's been able to do the same thing for Riba, but I think the silver lining of some of these injuries, Braylon Mullins missing last game after the concussion, is getting that second unit back involved. Because when the year started and Reed and Mullins were both out of the lineup, you got really good production from guys like Malachi Smith, from guys like Eric Riba. Malachi Smith just had probably his best game in a month at least against Providence. In that game, Mullins was out. Riba's starting to play back together again. Dan Hurley has spoken about the need to get Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, who are both in their 3rd year in the program. If you get that second unit clicking, Those are guys that have continuity in the system. And players like Silas Demery and Braylon Mullins, who are still kind of learning some of those intricacies, you should expect them to get cleaner and cleaner with those reps as the year goes on. So I agree with you. I think we have not seen the best of this UConn offense. And the other thing is they're playing teams that have scouted them for years. So while they don't run the exact same concepts, this is not just for UConn, but for everyone. We've seen offense ticks back up when you get out of conference play and go back into the NCAA tournament. All right, Trotter, as always, you are a wealth of information. People can find you over at cbssports.com, but don't go anywhere. We're coming right back here on the CBS Sports Network. I'm going to go to the mailbag and answer questions about our recently updated 2026 high school rankings in just a couple minutes. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where last week on this show, we broke down our updated 2026 high school basketball rankings. Now, we pride ourselves at 24/7 Sports at being the most accurate rankings in all of high school basketball recruiting. You do that through sheer sweat equity. You get in the gym and you watch as much as you can. You do that by having no conflicts of interest and working to reduce as many cognitive biases as possible. You also do that through transparency. So what I've tried to do over the course of the last 5 days is invite any questions. And I said that I would answer them right here live on national TV. And so this is how we're going to end the show. I'm going to go through this mailbag and answer some of the questions that you have submitted, whether it was on the 24/7 website or on social media. And we will begin at the top of the class. The question was, how much of a chance does Jordan Smith Jr. have of ending his high school career at number 1 overall? And this is a tricky question because I have said publicly that Jordan Smith is the best high school basketball player in the country. I will double down on that and say publicly that I will be voting for Jordan Smith for every National Player of the Year award that I am a voter for, which is multiple. Having said that, our rankings are based on projecting a futures market. In other words, we're not ranking who the best high school basketball player is. We're ranking who the best NBA prospect is, who might have the best college career. Literally, we're trying to synthesize those variables into one ranking. And when it comes to upside, I've still got to go with Tyron Stokes. Tyron Stokes is 6'7", 6'8". He's built like a football player. He's got magnetic hands. He's made great strides as a shooter. He's an instinctive playmaker, even though he's built like a forward. This guy can operate like a guard. So he, to me, is the best prospect in high school basketball. And in order for anyone, whether it's Jordan Smith or someone else, to overtake it, he would have to give it away first. I don't expect that to happen. You never know. But I think we're looking at Tyron Stokes finishing as the number 1 ranked prospect in the class. Jordan Smith is very firmly at number 2. And as I said, the best player in high school basketball. Hopefully I explained the distinction. The second question is, why did Christian Collins stay at number 9 after averaging 25 and 10 this season? Well, for a couple of reasons. Again, our rankings aren't just based on who the best high school player is. They are certainly not based on high school statistics. Many cases, I don't even look at those unless it's compiled by something like Synergy Sports because the high school stats are unreliable. What I will say, though, is that Christian has definitely had a bounce back season. It was candidly a little bit of a disappointing grassroots season for him, and yet we didn't drop him out of the top 10. So why then didn't we bump him back up after showing some signs of revitalization during the high school season? Well, because this is what we expected. We expected someone who at 6'8" has the motor, the athleticism, the kind of elasticity to be able to bend his body in different ways. And that gives you real versatility on the basketball floor. I've said this many times, but he's at his best when he's playing with a high motor, being switchable defensively, flying at the glass. And this high school season, to the point of the person who asked the question, we've seen some real growth offensively as a creator, gradually as a shooter. And that stuff's all been really exciting. But when you're a top 10 prospect in the class, that's what we were banking on. He's delivered. And so, in my opinion, he's lived up to our ranking. The next question, who do you think is the most intriguing big in the 2026 class? And I think the rest of this question said Adonis Ratliff. And in many cases, I have reworded these to make them a little more appropriate for TV since they are communicated over social media. Adonis Ratliff is one of two twin sons of Theo Ratliff, the longtime NBA player with the Philadelphia 76ers and others. And Adonis is loaded with upside. He's 6'11", if not 7 feet. He's an ultra fluid athlete, and he's really skilled. In fact, he had a game earlier this fall at the Border League where I believe he made maybe 10 threes in the game. So if you can think about that, a near 7-footer who covers the court effortlessly and shoots it with a naturally soft touch and is also athletic at the rim. So yeah, that is a real high upside prospect. The problem is that he doesn't play basketball very much. He missed almost the entire EYBL season, and he's missed the vast majority of the high school season. So durability is a huge swing skill for him. Durability is more important than ever if you're following basketball, not just college at the NBA level. So yes, if Adonis Ratliff can prove that he can get and stay healthy, he has as high an upside as anyone. But the durability is a major, major question mark at this point in time. All right, let's keep it going. This is one that I reworded a little bit. Why are you relying on EYBL statistics for Dakari Spear when he was injured? And I think this is in reference to, if you go on Dakari Spear's profile on the 24/7 site, you will see his EYBL statistics noted. And EYBL statistics or any grassroots circuit are relevant because they are collected by Synergy Sports, which is an independent group and really at the forefront of not just analytics, but video in the basketball space, college and NBA like. So those numbers are very relevant, particularly when it comes to things like shooting. Now, Dakari Spear, we are on the record, has been one of the biggest risers in the national class at this latest update. He's got a chance to keep rising. He plays for a dynamic prep team that is going to be in the national spotlight all season long. This is a guy that's got great length, a really imposing frame that he's only just beginning to fill out, and has shown, in my opinion, some real gains as a shooter, although that is what he was known for in large part as a youngster. The bottom line is that he's been way better in the high school season than he was in the grassroots season. Now, is he healthier? Yeah, he is, but there have also been some other gains. Hope that answers your question. All right, the next one. Can you explain Brandon McCoy's ranking? And this is similar, I think, to Christian Collins in that he is a player who, quote unquote, dropped. The first thing I would tell you about these perceived drops is when you're talking about someone who goes from 9 in the country to 15, he is still in the top 1% of the top 1% of high school basketball players. So don't get it misconstrued. We are huge Brandon McCoy fans. There's a reason why we not only had him in the top 3 at one point, but I believe he was even number 1 in the country as an underclassman. This is someone who is a big, physical, athletic guard who's still working on his skill set and overall guard skills. We need to see some progression, not just with it, but with his handle, with his decision making, with utilizing that stuff on the defensive end of the floor. If and when that happens, he'll rise again. If not, that's why we have him where he is. Last one. How much correlation will there be between your rankings and the McDonald's rosters? The McDonald's rosters are expected out next week, and there's a reason we release our rankings the week before, because we want it very clear exactly what our opinion is. Now, I am a McDonald's voter, and when those rosters comes out, I will not be saying anything positive or critical of that. It is the highest honor in high school basketball. But simply told, our rankings are public, they are current, and so you know exactly what I think. All right, I hope that answered everybody's questions. We will be coming back with one final take. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network. We've reached the point in the show where I usually give my final shot, but you know what? I appreciate everyone watching right now and submitting questions even up to the last minute. So I'm going to take one last question, and that is this. Who is the player you wanted to rank higher, but you didn't see enough of? What I will tell you is I make it my top priority to see every senior that we rank. There's 150 of them. And at this point in time, I have seen on film all of them more than I would care to admit. In person, I've seen 145 of them. The one who I haven't seen live yet, Boyan Zhang, Travis Branham has talked about him. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him. If and when I do, he could go up. Until then, you are going to want to watch all of our past episodes, as well as Eye on College Basketball, and my friends Matt Norlander, Gary Parrish, and of course, John Rothstein over at the CBS Sports YouTube page. Until next week, great week.